I'm Hannah Sullivan, 27, sitting frozen at my parents' polished oak dinner table while my father's words hang in the air like poison. You're no longer welcome in this family. My mother stares at her plate, avoiding eye contact. My brother Ryan smirks slightly, victorious. The family portrait behind them all fake smiles mocks me. 2 hours ago, I walked through these doors thinking this was just another Thanksgiving dinner. Now, I'm homeless, familyless, watching 30 years of lies unravel because I finally discovered what they did with my inheritance. They never expected me to find those documents. If you've ever felt that gut-wrenching moment when family betrayal hits you like a freight train, you know that feeling can't be described. I'm sharing my story today because I learned the hard way that sometimes blood isn't thicker than water. Before I continue, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments. If my family drama resonates with you, hit that subscribe button to join others who've survived similar journeys. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. Growing up, the Sullivans were the picture-perfect American family. At least, that's what everyone in our upscale Boston suburb believed. My father Robert, a successful corporate attorney, and my mother Margaret, a pediatrician with a thriving private practice, had crafted an impeccable image. Our colonial-style home hosted neighborhood barbecues in summer and elaborate Christmas parties each December. I was the reliable daughter, straight-A student who never caused trouble, while my brother Ryan was the charismatic son who could charm his way out of any situation. Hannah always does the right thing, my mother would tell her friends at country club luncheons, a statement that sounded like praise, but carried an undercurrent of expectation that weighed heavier with each passing year. Meanwhile, Ryan could do no wrong, despite his academic struggles, frequent traffic violations, and what my parents euphemistically called his creative accounting with the allowance they provided. I followed the blueprint they laid out: prestigious university, sensible career in financial analysis, modest apartment, close enough for regular visits, but far enough for the illusion of independence. Ryan, 4 years younger, bounced between business ventures, each one funded by increasingly generous loans from our parents that never seemed to require repayment. My grandmother Eleanor, my mother's mother, was the only person who seemed to see through the façade. A sharp-witted former mathematics professor with piercing blue eyes that missed nothing, she lived in the guest house on my parents' property after my grandfather passed. During Sunday dinners, she would often watch the family dynamics with a knowing look that made me wonder what she observed that I couldn't yet see. "Remember, Hannah," she told me during our last private conversation before her death last year, "sometimes what looks like love is actually control. Protect what's yours." At the time, I nodded respectfully, but didn't understand the warning in her words. Now I wish I'd asked her to elaborate. After graduating college, I built a career as a financial analyst for an investment firm, developing expertise in spotting irregularities and inconsistencies in complex financial documents. The irony isn't lost on me that these same skills would eventually uncover my family's betrayal. The first warning signs appeared subtly. When I moved to my apartment in Cambridge, my father insisted on being a co-signer on my lease despite my excellent credit score and stable income. When I pushed back, my mother called in tears, claiming I was breaking your father's heart by rejecting his help. I relented, not recognizing it as the first of many calculated moves to maintain financial entanglement. When I began dating Scott, a kind but modestly paid teacher, my parents' disapproval was immediate and sustained. My mother would casually mention eligible bachelors from good families during our weekly calls. My father would forward articles about the importance of marrying smart to ensure financial stability. The relationship eventually ended, with Scott citing the uncomfortable dynamic with my family as a contributing factor. After my grandmother's passing, I noticed a strange shift in my parents' behavior whenever I mentioned her. Conversations about her became shorter, redirected, or outright avoided. When I asked about her will and any inheritance arrangements during a family dinner 3 months after her funeral, my father abruptly changed the subject, and my mother knocked over her wine glass in what seemed like manufactured distraction. "Your grandmother's affairs have been handled appropriately," my father said later that evening, his tone indicating the subject was closed. Family matters stay within the family. Ryan, who had been texting throughout dinner, suddenly became attentive, exchanging a quick glance with my father that struck me as oddly complicit. The week before Thanksgiving this year, I requested time off to spend the holiday with my family, as was our tradition. My boss Julia approved the request and then casually mentioned, "By the way, congratulations on your property acquisition. That's a beautiful area in Vermont." I thanked her automatically before realizing I owned no property in Vermont or anywhere else. When I asked for clarification, she explained that during a business dinner with my father, he had mentioned the family vacation property I had recently inherited from my grandmother. This was the first I'd heard of any such inheritance. The revelation left me uneasy. That night, I called my mother under the pretense of confirming Thanksgiving arrangements and casually mentioned looking forward to seeing the Vermont property. "Oh, that's not happening," she said quickly. "Your father misspoke. We decided it made more financial sense to liquidate that asset." When I asked what happened to the proceeds, she fumbled through an explanation about family investments before claiming she had to hang up to attend to something in the oven. The conversation left me with a sinking feeling. The next day, I requested access to my grandmother's financial records and will from her attorney, only to be told that all documents had been transferred to my father as executor. My suspicions mounting, I decided to arrive for Thanksgiving 2 days early, claiming work obligations in Boston that made the early trip convenient. My parents seemed unusually tense about my early arrival, but maintained their customary politeness. On the second afternoon, while they were attending a pre-Thanksgiving function at the country club and Ryan was meeting with investors, I found myself alone in the house. Acting on instinct rather than plan, I went to my father's home office to search for information about my grandmother's estate. In the bottom drawer of his desk, hidden beneath tax records, I found a folder labeled Eleanor Estate Confidential. Inside were documents that made my blood run cold. My grandmother had indeed left her substantial savings, investment portfolio, and Vermont lake house to me specifically. A separate letter in her handwriting explained her decision. She had always worried about the favoritism shown to Ryan and wanted to ensure my financial independence. But accompanying these was another set of documents, transfer authorizations, power of attorney forms, with signatures that looked subtly different from my grandmother's handwriting on her letter, and bank statements showing the systematic movement of assets from accounts in her name to a holding company I recognized as the Shell Corporation funding Ryan's latest business venture. Most damning was an email exchange printed and filed between my father and their family attorney, discussing the reallocation of my inheritance to more suitable family purposes and strategies to ensure I would not discover the adjustments to Eleanor's original intentions. I photographed everything with shaking hands, replaced the documents exactly as I found them, and spent the night researching inheritance fraud while listening for any sound indicating my parents' early return. By Thanksgiving morning, I had confirmed my suspicions. My family had systematically diverted what appeared to be nearly $2 million in assets that my grandmother had intended for me. The question remaining was what to do with this information. Part of me wanted to confront them immediately. Another part wanted to consult an attorney first. After hours of internal debate, I decided that I needed to see their reactions face to face. I wanted them to know that I knew, and I foolishly believed there might be some explanation that would make sense of this betrayal. As I helped my mother prepare the Thanksgiving meal, the weight of my knowledge made each interaction feel surreal. When my father carved the turkey with theatrical flair, declaring as he did every year that he was thankful for family above all else, I had to excuse myself to the bathroom to regain my composure. By the time we sat down to dinner, I had resolved to bring up the inheritance after the meal, hoping that the tradition and sentiment of the holiday might somehow soften the confrontation. I could not have been more wrong. Our dining room looked like something from a home decor magazine. Thanksgiving perfection with an heirloom turkey platter, crystal glasses that caught the chandelier light, and my mother's carefully polished silver. The table was set with an autumn-themed centerpiece of miniature pumpkins, dried oak leaves, and cinnamon sticks. The food matched the presentation: herb-roasted turkey, cornbread stuffing, maple-glazed carrots, my grandmother's recipe for cranberry sauce, and 3 kinds of pie cooling in the kitchen. Hannah, would you like to say grace this year? My father asked, his voice carrying the practiced warmth he used in courtroom openings. I nodded, clasped my hands, and delivered the same generic Thanksgiving prayer I offered every year, thinking how this might be the last time I sat at this table. My voice nearly broke when I reached in for family, but I managed to finish without giving myself away. The first half hour passed with rehearsed conversations. My father discussed his latest case without revealing any confidential details, just enough for us to appreciate his legal brilliance. My mother shared an anecdote about a grateful patient's family that positioned her as both skilled physician and compassionate healer. I answered questions about my work with carefully edited responses that highlighted success without suggesting I might outshine my brother. Ryan dominated the conversation with elaborate tales of his latest business venture, an app that would revolutionize personal fitness by connecting users with personal trainers. His descriptions were vague on specifics, but heavy on projected revenue and potential investors. We're looking at a 7-figure valuation by second quarter next year, he announced, gesturing with his wine glass. I've got 3 venture capital firms practically begging to get in on the ground floor. My father nodded approvingly. Your grandmother would have been proud to see her legacy supporting such innovation. The casual reference to my grandmother's legacy was like a match to kindling. I set down my fork deliberately and took a sip of water to steady myself. Actually, I've been meaning to ask about grandmother's estate, I said, keeping my voice level. It's been almost a year now. The subtle shift in atmosphere was immediate. My mother's hand froze midway to her wine glass. My father's chewing slowed as his eyes narrowed slightly. What about it? He asked, his tone casual but his posture suddenly rigid. I was just wondering how everything was distributed, I continued. Grandmother and I were close, and she never mentioned her plans to me. Estate matters are complicated, Hannah, my father said dismissively. Your mother and I handled everything according to legal requirements. There's no need for you to concern yourself with the details. My mother jumped in, her voice slightly higher than normal. Your grandmother wanted the family taken care of as a whole. She understood the importance of supporting all of us collectively. Ryan smirked behind his napkin. Some of us are using our inheritance to create value, not just sitting on it. The confirmation in his casual cruelty gave me the push I needed. I reached for my purse hanging on the chair back and withdrew the folder containing the copies I'd made. That's interesting, I said, laying the folder on the table. Because according to her actual will and this letter in her handwriting, grandmother specifically left her savings, investments, and the Vermont property to me directly. The room went completely silent. My father's face flushed dark red, starting at his neck and climbing to his hairline. My mother's complexion did the opposite, draining to a sickly pale shade as her eyes darted between my father and the folder. Where did you get those? My father demanded, his attorney voice now in full effect. From your office, I answered honestly. Yesterday, while you were at the club, I was looking for old family photos and found something very different instead. You went through my private files? His voice rose with each word. That's a violation of— Don't talk to me about violations, I interrupted, surprising even myself with my steadiness. I have copies of everything: the original will, grandmother's letter, explaining why she wanted me to have financial independence, and your emails discussing how to divert my inheritance to Ryan's business ventures. Ryan's smug expression faltered. Dad, what is she talking about? My father regained his composure with frightening speed. Your sister is misinterpreting routine estate administration documents. Nothing illegal or improper occurred. Really? I opened the folder and removed several pages. So these transfer authorizations with grandmother's signature, dated 3 months after her death, are routine? Or this power of attorney form where her signature doesn't match her handwriting on her personal letter to me? My mother began to cry, quiet tears that she tried to hide by dabbing at the corners of her eyes with her napkin. Robert, perhaps we should just explain. There's nothing to explain, Margaret, my father snapped. Hannah has taken confidential documents out of context and jumped to outrageous conclusions. I looked directly at my brother. Ryan, Did you know the money funding your business came from what grandmother intended for me? His momentary discomfort vanished as he shrugged. The money stayed in the family. My success benefits everyone. You've always been financially conservative to a fault. The funds would have just sat in some boring index fund with you. That wasn't your decision to make, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to remain calm. Any of you. Grandmother wanted me to have financial security independent from the family. You stole that from me. My father slammed his hand on the table, making the silverware jump. That's enough. You have no legal training and no understanding of estate administration. What your grandmother may have initially intended and what made sense for the family as a whole are two different matters. So you admit you went against her wishes? I pressed. I made appropriate adjustments as executor, he replied, his lawyer façade fully intact now. Everything was done legally and with the family's best interests in mind. My best interests? I asked. Or Ryan's? My mother reached across the table toward me, her fingers trembling. Hannah, please try to understand. Ryan's business needed significant capital. Your father and I had already invested so much in it. Using your grandmother's estate made practical sense for everyone. The casual acknowledgement of their betrayal stunned me. There was no denial, no elaborate explanation, just the simple admission that they had decided my inheritance would be better used elsewhere. I've consulted with an attorney, I lied, wanting to see their reaction. He believes we have a strong case for fraud and breach of fiduciary duty. The effect was immediate. My father's expression hardened from anger to something colder and more calculated. If that's the path you choose, you need to consider the consequences very carefully. Are you threatening me? I asked. I'm advising you, he replied. Legal battles are expensive, time-consuming, and rarely provide the vindication people hope for. More importantly, pursuing this would mean positioning yourself against your family. Is that really what you want? Ryan leaned forward. Come on, sis. The money's already been invested. Most of it's tied up in development and marketing. You'd just be hurting everyone, including yourself. I looked at each of them, my father's stern authority, my mother's tearful manipulation, my brother's entitled dismissal. The family dynamics I'd accepted my entire life suddenly appeared in harsh clarity. I want what grandmother intended me to have, I stated firmly. I want the truth acknowledged, and I want what was taken from me returned. My father stood up slowly, placing his napkin precisely beside his plate. Then you've made your choice. If you pursue this legal vendetta against your own family, you are no longer welcome in this house or in our lives. Robert! My mother gasped. No, Margaret. Hannah needs to understand the stakes here. Family loyalty versus a selfish financial grab. If she chooses the latter, she chooses to stand alone. I stood as well, my legs unsteady but my resolve firm. That's not the choice at all. This is about honesty versus deception, respect versus exploitation. I'm not the one who betrayed family loyalty. You're no longer welcome in this family, my father repeated, his voice flat and final. Pack your things and leave tonight. Any further communication can go through our attorneys. In that moment, I realized that the conditional nature of my family's love had always been there, hidden beneath surface affection and masked by obligation. My place in the family had been secure only as long as I played by their rules and accepted my designated role. I'll get my things, I said, pushing my chair back from the table. No one moved to stop me. I moved through the house like a ghost, packing essentials into the suitcase I'd brought for my planned 5-day visit. The framed photos on my childhood bedroom walls, academic achievements, family vacations, carefully staged portraits now seemed like artifacts from a fictional life. I took none of them. As I folded clothes into my suitcase, my mother appeared in the doorway, her mascara smudged from crying. She stood watching me for several minutes before speaking. Hannah, surely there's a compromise we can reach, she offered weakly. Your father says things in anger that he doesn't always mean. I continued packing without looking at her. He seemed quite clear to me. And you didn't disagree with him. You have to understand our position, she said, stepping into the room. Ryan's business ventures needed substantial capital. The family name is attached to his success. And what about me? I asked, finally meeting her gaze. Doesn't the family name attach to me as well? She sighed, perching on the edge of the bed. You've always been so capable, Hannah. So independent. Ryan needs more support to find his way. The familiarity of this justification struck me anew. How often had similar reasoning been used throughout our childhood? Ryan needed the newest gaming system to keep up with friends. Ryan needed the more expensive college to make connections. Ryan needed the downtown apartment to impress potential business partners. Mom, I said, zipping my suitcase closed, did you even read grandmother's letter? Did you understand why she wanted me to have financial independence? My mother looked away. Your grandmother didn't understand the complexities of our family dynamics. She always had a soft spot for you that clouded her judgment. You mean she saw through the favoritism? I corrected. When I moved toward the door with my suitcase, she made no move to stop me. Instead, she said, if you pursue this legally, it will destroy this family. I paused in the doorway. The family was destroyed the moment you and Dad decided to steal my inheritance. Downstairs, Ryan leaned against the wall near the front door, arms crossed. As I approached, he straightened and blocked my path. You're making a huge mistake, he said, his voice low. Dad has connections everywhere in this city. You really want to make an enemy of him? Is that a threat? I asked. He shrugged. Just pointing out reality. Back off this inheritance thing. Apologize for the accusation, and maybe in a few months, things can go back to normal. Normal wasn't working for me anymore, I replied, stepping around him. As I placed my suitcase in the trunk of my car, I noticed something in the garbage bins at the side of the house, a cardboard box containing what looked like old books and photo albums. Curiosity pulled me closer, and I recognized my childhood keepsakes, scrapbooks I'd made in high school, award certificates, even the stuffed bear grandmother had given me when I was 7. They had already begun erasing me. I drove aimlessly through neighborhoods decorated for Thanksgiving, past homes with warm light spilling from windows and cars parked in driveways for family gatherings. The surreal contrast between holiday celebrations and my own situation felt like a physical pain in my chest. My first calls were to friends who might offer temporary shelter, but most were away visiting their own families for the holiday. After the 5th voicemail, I pulled into a convenience store parking lot and searched for hotels on my phone. The Golden Crown Motel off the highway had a vacancy, a small room with faded floral wallpaper, a sagging double bed, and the persistent hum of vending machines outside the window. I paid for 3 nights, using my credit card after confirming it wasn't a joint account my parents could access. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I took inventory of my situation. I had my laptop, phone, about a week's worth of clothes, basic toiletries, and approximately $3,400 in my personal checking account. My apartment in Cambridge was secure, but I'd need to return to work in 4 days. The practical aspects of my crisis were manageable. The emotional reality was something else entirely. When the full weight of the evening finally hit me, the breakdown came in waves. First came uncontrollable shaking, then heaving sobs that left me gasping for breath. I curled into a ball on the bed, clutching a pillow against my chest, as 3 decades of family dynamics crystallized into one devastating realization. I had always been conditional to them, a supporting character in the story of my brother's life. Around midnight, my phone lit up with a text from Alicia, my closest friend since college, responding to my earlier message. What? Just landing in Chicago, calling you in 5. Hearing her voice provided the first moment of normalcy in hours. Between sobs, I explained what had happened. Those absolute monsters, she said when I finished. Hannah, listen to me. You can stay at my place when you get back to the city. I'm with my parents until Sunday, but I'll leave a key with the building manager. And my dad knows a great attorney who specializes in estate law. Her practical support anchored me. I don't even know if I have a legal case, I admitted. I only have copies of documents I technically obtained by snooping. Doesn't matter right now, she replied firmly. First priority is making sure you're safe and have what you need. We'll figure out the legal stuff later. Have you eaten anything since breakfast? I hadn't. The realization of basic needs neglected prompted me to order delivery from the only place still open, a pizza chain whose driver looked surprised to be delivering to the motel on Thanksgiving night. I left him an excessive tip. The next morning, I contacted my workplace, speaking directly to my supervisor, Julia. I gave her a condensed version of events, emphasizing the family financial dispute without all the emotional details. "Take the time you need," she said, concern evident in her voice. "Family legal issues can be complicated. Would an additional week help?" I accepted gratefully, buying myself valuable time to reorganize my life. Next, I made a list of what had been taken from me and what remained within my control. The inheritance, approximately $2 million in assets, including the Vermont property, had been illegally diverted. But my education, career, friendships, and personal integrity remained intact. I spent the rest of the morning researching inheritance fraud and estate law, creating a folder of potentially relevant statutes and cases. The information was overwhelming, but the analytical part of my brain welcomed the focus of research as a counterbalance to emotional turmoil. By afternoon, I discovered my parents had already made their first financial move against me. A joint savings account established when I was in college had been emptied. Though it contained only about $5,200, the swift action confirmed they anticipated a legal battle. I called my bank to secure my remaining accounts and credit cards, changing passwords and adding additional verification steps. That evening, I drove to a different restaurant for dinner, unwilling to spend another meal in the motel room. As I sat alone in a booth, picking at a sandwich, I noticed a family in the opposite corner, parents and adult children laughing over shared desserts. The casual intimacy of their interaction sent a fresh wave of grief through me. Not just for what had happened, but for what I was beginning to suspect had never really existed in my family at all. I'll share more about what happened next in a moment, but first, if you're feeling the weight of this story so far, take a breath with me. Family betrayal cuts deeper than any other kind. If you've experienced something similar, know you're not alone. Drop a heart in the comments if you've ever had to stand up to toxic family dynamics. Sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is walk away from what hurts us, even when it's family. On the third day after Thanksgiving, I received an unexpected call from a number I didn't recognize. The woman on the line introduced herself as Elaine Foster, my grandmother's longtime friend and bridge partner. "Hannah, dear, I hope you don't mind me calling. Your number was in Eleanor's address book, and I've been hearing concerning rumors about some family disagreement over her estate." I nearly dropped the phone. "How did you hear about that?" Elaine explained that she still golfed with several women from my mother's social circle. Country clubs are terrible for gossip, especially when Margaret Sullivan starts drinking wine at lunch. "She's telling people you've had some sort of breakdown and are making wild accusations about family finances." The character assassination wasn't surprising, but the speed of it was. "Mrs. Foster, I'm not having a breakdown. I discovered documents showing my parents diverted my inheritance to my brother's business ventures." The silence on the other end lasted several seconds. "Oh dear. I was afraid of something like this. Hannah, there's something you should know. I was the witness to your grandmother's will signing, and I was named as the secondary executor if your father was unable or unwilling to serve." This was information I hadn't found in my hasty document review. "So you knew what was in her will?" "Yes, and Eleanor was very specific about her wishes. The bulk of her estate was to go to you directly, with some smaller bequests to charities. She worried about the dynamic in your family and wanted you to have financial independence." "That matches the letter I found," I confirmed. "There's more," Elaine continued. "About 2 months after Eleanor passed, your father contacted me saying he was consolidating all executor duties and asked me to sign some papers releasing my secondary executor status. He was quite insistent, claiming it was simplifying matters for tax purposes." My heart raced. "Did you sign?" "I did, and I've regretted it since. The papers were complex legal documents, and he didn't leave them with me to review properly. Eleanor would be furious with me for allowing this to happen." Elaine's revelation was both validating and actionable. She agreed to provide a sworn statement about the original will's contents and the circumstances of her removal as secondary executor. Before hanging up, she mentioned something else. You should contact Philip Winters at Winters and Associates. He was your grandmother's attorney for decades before your father convinced her to switch to his firm's estate department about a year before she died. Philip never believed the change was Eleanor's idea. Within hours, I had an appointment with Philip Winters, a silver-haired attorney whose office decor hadn't been updated since the 1980 seconds. He remembered my grandmother fondly and was visibly troubled by my account. I handled Eleanor's legal affairs for 32 years, he explained, leaning back in his worn leather chair. She was meticulous about her finances and very clear about her intentions. The change to your father's firm came suddenly, with a form letter I believe was written by him, not her. While attorney-client privilege prevented him from sharing specific details about my grandmother's previous estate plans, he confirmed that earlier versions had contained special provisions for your financial independence and expressed concerns about the timing and circumstances of the change in legal representation. I can't be directly involved in a case against your father due to the conflict of interest with having represented your grandmother, he advised. But I can recommend several excellent attorneys who specialize in estate fraud. And I can provide a statement regarding the suspicious circumstances of Eleanor moving her legal affairs. As I left his office with a list of attorney referrals, my phone buzzed with a text from a college acquaintance who worked at my company. Hannah, just heard your dad called HR asking about your employment status and benefits. Thought you should know. The intimidation tactics were escalating. Back in my motel room, I reached out to the attorneys on Philip Winters' list. The first two declined, citing conflicts of interest that I suspected were really fears of opposing my father's influential firm. The third, Meredith Chen from Donovan & Chen, agreed to meet the following day. My temporary support network expanded again when I received an email from cousin Jessica, my father's brother's daughter, who had been estranged from the family for years following a similar financial dispute. Hannah, I heard what happened, she wrote. The same thing happened to me with Uncle Robert's help managing my college fund. If you're pursuing this legally, I have information that might help establish a pattern of behavior. Call me. Our subsequent phone conversation revealed disturbing similarities. Jessica's college fund, established by her grandparents, had mysteriously diminished under my father's management, with large sums redirected to family investments that primarily benefited my parents and Ryan. When Jessica questioned the discrepancies, she too was cut off from the family. They'll try to isolate you completely, she warned. They'll contact your friends, colleagues, anyone who might support you, and paint you as unstable or greedy or both. Document everything. And don't be afraid to cut contact with people who buy into their version of events. As predicted, my phone filled with messages from family, friends, and distant relatives, some expressing concern about my mental health episode and others condemning my ungrateful attacks on family. I responded to none of them, focusing instead on building my legal case. On Monday morning, I met with Meredith Chen, whose youthful appearance belied a razor-sharp legal mind and a specialization in contentious estate litigation. She reviewed my copied documents carefully, taking detailed notes. Based on what you've shown me, there appear to be multiple serious issues here, she said. Potential forgery on transfer documents, breach of fiduciary duty, possible fraud, and clear violation of the testator's intent. The fact that your father was both executor and beneficiary of these adjustments is particularly problematic from a legal standpoint. Do I have a case? I asked directly. You have enough to proceed with formal discovery, which would compel production of the original documents and financial records, she explained. That's often where these cases break open. But I should warn you, litigation against family, especially when one party is a lawyer, gets ugly quickly and can drag on for years. I understand, I replied, but I need to do this, not just for the money, but because it's what my grandmother wanted. She was trying to protect me, and I owe it to her to fight for that. Meredith nodded, her expression softening slightly. In that case, my recommendation is to pursue this aggressively and prepare for significant resistance. Your father will likely use every procedural tactic to delay and exhaust your resources. Are you financially prepared for that? I wasn't, not really. But I was committed. I'll find a way. By Wednesday, I had returned to my apartment in Cambridge, with Alicia insisting on staying with me for moral support. My email contained a formal termination notice from my landlord. My father had contacted them, claiming I was breaking lease terms. Because he was co-signer, they were inclined to believe him, despite my perfect payment history. Another battle to fight. The following day brought news that my parents had filed a restraining order against me, claiming harassment and threatening behavior, a preemptive legal maneuver to paint me as the aggressor. Meredith assured me we could fight it successfully, but warned it was likely the first of many such tactics. The systematic isolation continued. Former family friends stopped returning calls. Distant relatives blocked me on social media. Even my mother's sister, who had always been kind to me, sent a terse message, asking me not to contact her during this difficult family time. The emotional toll mounted daily. Sleep became elusive, replaced by circular thoughts and anxiety. I startled at ordinary sounds and found myself checking door locks repeatedly. When Alicia found me at 3 a.m., researching inheritance fraud cases for the fourth night in a row, she gently closed my laptop. "You need to talk to someone professional about this," she insisted. "The legal part is in your attorney's hands, but the emotional part that needs attention too." She was right. The next day, I found a therapist specializing in family trauma and financial abuse, Dr. Sarah Kaplan, who could see me on an emergency basis. In our first session, she helped me name what I was experiencing. "What you're describing involves several forms of abuse," she explained. "Financial exploitation, gaslighting, emotional manipulation, and now, what we call post-separation abuse tactics, using systems like courts, professional connections, and social networks as weapons against you for asserting boundaries." "I always thought abuse was more obvious," I said. "Physical or overtly cruel." "That's a common misconception," Dr. Kaplan replied. "Some of the most damaging abuse happens in relationships that appear functional on the surface. Your family conditioned you to accept certain dynamics as normal when they were actually quite harmful." These sessions became a crucial support as the legal battle intensified. Dr. Kaplan helped me recognize the familiar guilt and self-doubt that arose whenever I considered dropping the case, the same emotions my family had leveraged to maintain control throughout my life. "Your grandmother tried to protect you from exactly this dynamic," she reminded me during a particularly difficult session. "By fighting for your inheritance, you're also honoring her understanding of what you needed." By the third week after Thanksgiving, my support network included Alicia, Dr. Kaplan, cousin Jessica, Elaine Foster, a determined attorney, and several colleagues who stood by me despite my parents' attempts to undermine my professional reputation. It wasn't the family I had lost, but it was a foundation of authentic support unlike anything I'd experienced before. When the formal legal complaint was filed against my parents and brother, local legal circles buzzed with the news. My father's firm issued an immediate statement calling the allegations preposterous and promising a vigorous defense. The battle lines were clearly drawn. That evening, I received the first direct contact from my mother since Thanksgiving, a text message that read simply, "We could have resolved this privately. Your father will never settle now that you've embarrassed him publicly. You've destroyed this family. No acknowledgement of their actions. No recognition of the betrayal. Just blame for exposing the truth." I didn't respond. Instead, I met with a forensic accountant Meredith had recommended to trace the money trail from my grandmother's accounts to Ryan's business ventures. The preliminary findings confirmed what we suspected: systematic transfers disguised as legitimate estate administration, with documentation that appeared increasingly suspect under expert scrutiny. As we prepare to continue this story, I want to pause and acknowledge something important. Standing up for yourself against family manipulation is one of the hardest things you'll ever do. The people who share your blood know exactly which emotional buttons to push. If you're going through something similar right now, please know it does get better. Finding your voice takes courage, but it's the first step toward building a life based on truth rather than obligation. If this resonates with you, let me know in the comments, and share this video with someone who might need to hear that they deserve better from family. Finding the right attorney had been crucial, but assembling a complete legal team proved challenging. Many law firms declined to take the case after learning my father's firm was involved, citing nebulous conflicts of interest or being at capacity. After 2 weeks of rejections, Meredith Chen introduced me to her former colleague Marcus Rivera, a forensic accountant with experience testifying in inheritance fraud cases. "What you've shown me already raises several red flags," Marcus said during our first meeting, spreading photocopied bank statements across his desk. These transfers occurred in an unusual pattern, small enough to avoid triggering automatic reviews, but consistent enough to move substantial sums over a 3-month period. He pointed to a series of transactions, and these transfers to shell companies, they create a deliberately confusing paper trail. It's textbook obfuscation. The financial strain of building this case became apparent immediately. Meredith required a $15,000 retainer, while Marcus charged $300 per hour for his forensic work. I liquidated my modest investment portfolio and took a personal loan from Alicia, promising repayment when the case resolved. "Don't think about that now," she insisted, writing a check for $5,000. "Consider it an investment in justice." 3 days after filing our initial complaint, my parents' attorney, William Davidson, from my father's own firm, delivered a cease and desist letter threatening countersuits for defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and bizarrely, tortious interference with business relationships regarding Ryan's company. Meredith read the letter and smiled slightly. "This is all bluster. They're trying to intimidate you into dropping the case before discovery begins. It actually tells me we've hit a nerve." Meanwhile, my parents' campaign to discredit me intensified. Through the whisper network of family connections, they spread stories about my mental instability and financial irresponsibility. My cousin Jessica forwarded an email my mother had sent to extended family, describing me as troubled and in need of prayers and professional help, while warning against believing my delusional accusations. The professional attacks came next. My direct supervisor, Julia, called me into her office with an uncomfortable expression. "Hannah, I've received some concerning calls from several board members," she began cautiously. "They say they've been contacted by your father with information about your personal situation. He's suggesting your judgment may be compromised by emotional issues." "He's trying to get me fired," I stated flatly. Julia nodded. "That appears to be the intent. Fortunately, our board members are skeptical of unsolicited character assassinations. But I wanted you to be aware this is happening." Late-night phone calls began, my phone ringing at 2 or 3 a.m., showing either Ryan's number or blocked IDs. When I finally answered one, Ryan's voice slurred with what sounded like alcohol. "You have no idea what you've done," he said. "Dad is pulling strings you don't even know exist. Drop this now or your career in finance is over." I recorded these calls on Meredith's advice, adding them to our growing evidence file. The threatening behavior only strengthened our case, but the emotional toll mounted. Each day brought new anxiety about what boundaries my family might cross next. The case preparation intensified as we approached the discovery phase. Meredith filed motions to compel production of all original documents related to my grandmother's estate, including the original will, transfer authorizations, and complete financial records. My parents' attorney responded with motions to dismiss, claiming I lacked standing to challenge the executor's decisions. "Standard delay tactics," Meredith explained. "They're hoping to drain your resources before we get to substantive issues." A breakthrough came from an unexpected direction. Elaine Foster had continued reaching out to her social connections and located Trevor Hamilton, the notary who had supposedly witnessed signatures on several key transfer documents. "I don't recall notarizing anything for Hannah Sullivan after September of last year," he told us during a preliminary interview. "And I certainly never notarized anything with her signature after her death." When shown the documents bearing his notary stamp and signature, he frowned deeply. "That's not my signature. And while that looks like my stamp, Notice the registration number is off by 1 digit from my actual stamp. This evidence of potential forgery shifted the case significantly. Meredith immediately filed for expedited document examination and amended our complaint to include allegations of forgery and notary fraud, criminal matters that would complicate my father's defense strategy. The case took another turn when Ryan's business partners began contacting us. Jason Miller, the lead developer for Ryan's fitness app, provided a sworn statement that the company had received family investment of nearly $1.8 million, which Ryan had described as inheritance money that was totally clean and legal. I started getting suspicious when Ryan kept dodging questions about the source of funds during investor meetings, Jason explained. Then he started withdrawing large sums for consulting fees that didn't match any services we were receiving. Another partner, Denise Wong, provided financial records showing Ryan had diverted at least $300,000 from the business to personal expenses, including a luxury car lease, an extended stay at an exclusive ski resort, and substantial gambling debts in Las Vegas. When I questioned these expenses, Ryan told me his father had approved them as legitimate business development costs, Denise stated in her affidavit. He implied that questioning these expenses would jeopardize the remaining investment tranches. Bank records obtained through subpoena revealed the truth about my grandmother's assets. The original estate had been valued at approximately $2.4 million, significantly more than I had initially estimated. Of this, nearly $1.8 million had been transferred through various shell companies to Ryan's business venture, while the Vermont property valued at $650,000 had been sold with proceeds directed to a holding company controlled by my father. Most damning was the discovery that my parents had falsified my grandmother's signature on multiple documents dated after her death. The forensic document examiner's report was unequivocal. The questioned signatures show clear evidence of simulation rather than genuine execution by the same hand that produced the known exemplars. 6 months into the legal battle, my father's aggressive strategy began to falter as evidence mounted. His firm's managing partners, concerned about potential criminal implications and reputational damage, urged him to consider settlement. William Davidson was replaced as counsel by Regina Torres, a litigation partner known for resolving contentious cases before trial. My clients maintained that all actions taken were legal and appropriate, Torres stated in our first settlement conference, her tone suggesting she didn't fully believe this herself. However, they recognize that continued litigation serves no one's interests and are prepared to discuss resolution options. Meredith, who had anticipated this pivot, presented our settlement demands: full restoration of my inheritance with interest, compensation for legal fees, and a written acknowledgement of the original terms of my grandmother's will. Torres balked at the last item. My clients cannot admit to any wrongdoing as part of a settlement. That's non-negotiable. Then we'll see them in court, Meredith replied calmly. Our forensic evidence will make quite an impression on a jury, don't you think? The negotiations continued through 3 tense sessions over 2 weeks. Throughout these discussions, I remained firm on one point. I wanted not just the financial restoration, but acknowledgement of what had been done. The money mattered less to me than the recognition of the truth. As the legal proceedings intensified, my personal transformation continued in parallel. The Hannah who had sought her parents' approval at any cost was gone, replaced by someone who understood her own worth independent of family validation. Each legal victory, however small, reinforced this evolving identity. You're not the same person who walked into my office 6 months ago, Meredith observed after a particularly grueling deposition. You've found your voice. She was right. The journey had been painful, but necessary. My grandmother had tried to give me financial independence, but in fighting for that legacy, I had found something more valuable: personal sovereignty and the courage to stand alone when necessary. While the legal battle consumed much of my energy, rebuilding my life required equal attention. 2 months after the confrontation, I found a new apartment, a modest 1-bedroom in a secure building that required no cosigner. The process of furnishing it with only what I chose, arranging spaces according to my preferences alone, became an unexpected exercise in self-discovery. I never realized how many of my choices were influenced by what my parents would approve of, I told Dr. Kaplan during one therapy session. Even down to the color of my towels. That's common in family systems like yours, she explained. Control extends into the smallest details until the controlling patterns become internalized. You start policing yourself according to their standards without even realizing it. These therapy sessions became crucial to my healing process. Through Dr. Kaplan's guidance, I began recognizing the subtle ways my family's dynamic had shaped my self-perception and behavior. The pattern of being the good daughter who never caused trouble, while Ryan enjoyed freedom from consequences. The way I had learned to downplay my achievements to avoid triggering my brother's insecurity. The constant seeking of parental approval that had governed so many decisions. What you're describing is a classic family structure with a golden child and a scapegoat, Dr. Kaplan explained. Ryan was the golden child who could do no wrong, while you were expected to be responsible but never outshine him. Your grandmother seems to have been the only one who recognized this dynamic and tried to intervene. Understanding these patterns helped me process the grief of losing my family, not just the family that had rejected me at Thanksgiving, but the idealized family I had believed in throughout my life. I mourned both losses, gradually accepting that my parents had never been the people I had needed them to be. I keep having this recurring dream, I confided to Dr. Kaplan. I'm standing outside our family home, but my key doesn't work. Through the window, I can see everyone inside having dinner, laughing, like nothing's wrong. I knock, but no one hears me. That's your psyche processing the rejection, she explained. But notice something important in the dream. You're outside looking in. Your unconscious already knows that your place is no longer in that house, with those people. That's progress. As months passed, I developed healthier boundaries in all relationships. I became more direct in expressing needs and opinions at work, no longer fearing disapproval. I pursued interests I had previously abandoned because my parents found them impractical, taking weekend painting classes and joining a recreational soccer league. My professional life flourished, despite my father's attempts to undermine me. When word of the lawsuit spread through financial circles, several colleagues approached me privately with their own stories of encountering my father's ethical shortcuts over the years. Julia, my supervisor, became an unexpected ally, shielding me from the political fallout and assigning me to high-profile projects that showcased my analytical abilities. Your work speaks for itself, she told me during a performance review. And frankly, standing up to corruption takes courage I respect. This firm values integrity. By midsummer, I received an unexpected promotion to senior analyst, with a substantial salary increase that eased my financial strain. The timing couldn't have been better, as my legal expenses had depleted my savings and created significant debt. I established a strict budget and payment plan, focusing on the long-term goal rather than immediate financial comfort. Perhaps the most profound change came in how I built relationships. Without the constant background anxiety of maintaining my family's approval, I found myself forming more authentic connections with people who appreciated me for who I actually was, not who I pretended to be. Alicia noticed the shift first. You laugh differently now, she observed one evening as we shared dinner in my new apartment. It sounds more real. What do you mean? I asked, surprised. Before, your laugh always seemed a bit careful, like you were making sure it wasn't too loud or too much. Now it's just free. These moments of recognition of how constrained I had been and how much freer I was becoming arrived unexpectedly. Sometimes they brought sadness for the years, spent contorting myself to fit my family's expectations. More often, they carried a sense of liberation, of possibilities opening before me. I began attending a support group for adults estranged from family members, where I met others navigating similar journeys. Their stories varied widely. Some had left abusive parents. Others had been rejected for their sexuality or life choices. Still others had experienced financial exploitation like mine. What united us was the challenge of rebuilding identity outside the context of family definition. Society doesn't give us scripts for this, said Marcus, a group member in his 50s who had been estranged from his parents for over 2 decades. Everything in our culture assumes family is forever, that blood ties supersede all else. We're creating new narratives. Through these connections, I began to understand that family could be chosen rather than merely inherited. The support network I had built during crisis evolved into a community bound by mutual respect and genuine care qualities that had been conditional in my biological family. By fall, nearly 10 months after the confrontation, I found myself strong enough to help others who had experienced similar betrayals. When a colleague's parents attempted to control her through financial manipulation, I shared my experience and connected her with resources. The ability to transform my pain into support for someone else marked a significant milestone in my healing. During this period, I also reconnected with several estranged relatives who had experienced similar treatment from my father over the years. Beyond cousin Jessica, I discovered my father's youngest brother Thomas had been cut off from the family after questioning my grandfather's estate management. Another situation where my father had served as executor and funds had mysteriously diminished. Robert has always used money as both weapon and reward, Uncle Thomas explained during our first phone call. It was his way of maintaining control even when our father was alive. I'm sorry you've experienced it too, but not surprised. These conversations revealed a multi-generational pattern of financial manipulation and conditional love that extended far beyond my immediate experience. My grandmother's attempt to break this cycle through her bequest to me took on deeper significance as I understood the family history more completely. I began keeping a journal to document both the legal proceedings and my emotional journey. Initially, a therapeutic exercise recommended by Dr. Kaplan, it evolved into something more meaningful, a record of transformation that helped me recognize my progress when difficult days made it hard to see. One evening in late September, reviewing earlier entries, I was struck by how different my voice sounded from the first desperate entries written from the motel room. The confusion and self-doubt had given way to clarity and purpose. The desperate need for family reconciliation had been replaced by a commitment to truth, regardless of relationship consequences. I used to think strength meant never breaking, I wrote that night. Now I understand that real strength is continuing forward even after being broken. Every piece I've reassembled belongs authentically to me now. This hard-won wisdom prepared me for the final phase of the legal battle, a showdown that would test everything I had built within myself during these months of challenge and growth. The case had been proceeding through the court system for nearly a year when the judge assigned to it, Justice Eleanor Peterson, the coincidence of sharing my grandmother's first name wasn't lost on me, ordered a mediation session before proceeding to trial. All parties were required to attend in person, the first time I would face my family since walking out of their house the previous Thanksgiving. "This doesn't mean we're settling," Meredith cautioned as we prepared. "Mediation is mandatory in cases like this in our jurisdiction. We'll listen to their offer, but we're proceeding from a position of strength." The evidence speaks for itself. The mediation was scheduled for October 15th at a neutral law office downtown. I spent the night before in anxious preparation, rehearsing what I might say when face to face with my parents and brother again. Dr. Kaplan had helped me develop grounding techniques for managing the emotional intensity of the encounter, focused breathing, silent mantras, and physical anchoring through pressure points. "Remember," she advised during our final session before the meeting, "they may try to trigger your familiar patterns of guilt and obligation. Their power lies in their ability to activate those old emotional pathways. Your power lies in recognizing when it's happening and choosing a different response." The conference room was arranged with deliberate formality, a long mahogany table with the mediator at the head, plaintiffs and defendants on opposite sides. I arrived early with Meredith and Marcus, taking time to acclimate to the space before my family arrived. When they entered, the physical changes in them were immediately apparent. My father looked older, the confident posture diminished slightly. My mother seemed smaller somehow, her carefully maintained appearance showing subtle signs of strain. Ryan entered last, gaze fixed on his phone, refusing to look in my direction. Justice Watkins, a retired judge serving as mediator, called the session to order with practiced neutrality. We're here to determine whether litigation is necessary or if a resolution can be reached that satisfies all parties. I've reviewed the case files and evidence submitted by both sides. Let's begin with a statement of current positions. Regina Torres spoke first, outlining my parents' perspective that all actions taken regarding my grandmother's estate had been within the legal discretion of the executor, and that my claims were based on misunderstanding of complex estate administration matters. Meredith followed, systematically dismantling this position with reference to specific evidence. The original will and letter, stating my grandmother's intentions, forensic proof of falsified signatures, bank records showing the systematic diversion of assets, and expert testimony regarding breach of fiduciary duty. My client is not pursuing this case out of greed or vindictiveness, she concluded. She is seeking restoration of her grandmother's clearly stated wishes and acknowledgement of the wrongdoing that prevented those wishes from being fulfilled. Throughout these opening statements, I maintained eye contact with the mediator, avoiding looking directly at my family. But when Justice Watkins invited each party to speak personally about their perspective on potential resolution, I finally turned to face them. My grandmother tried to provide me with financial independence because she recognized unhealthy patterns in our family dynamics, I began, my voice steadier than I expected. In diverting that inheritance, you didn't just take money and property that were legally mine. You violated her last wishes and confirmed every concern she had about how this family operates. My father's face remained impassive, but my mother's eyes filled with tears. Ryan stared at the ceiling, jaw tight. I'm not interested in punishing you, I continued. I'm interested in truth and in honoring my grandmother's intentions. Any resolution needs to include both financial restoration and acknowledgement of what actually happened. My father cleared his throat, the lawyer's mask firmly in place. While I disagree with your characterization of events, I am willing to discuss financial terms to put this unfortunate situation behind us. However, I cannot and will not admit to any impropriety or illegal action. The reputation I've built over 40 years in legal practice is non-negotiable. Even when the evidence of forgery is irrefutable, Meredith interjected. Your signature appears as witness on documents allegedly signed by Hannah Sullivan 3 months after her death. The forensic examination confirms this conclusively. My father's composure slipped momentarily, a flash of anger crossing his face before he controlled it. Those administrative details were handled by paralegals. If errors occurred, they were not intentional. Transferring nearly $2 million is hardly an administrative detail, Marcus noted dryly. Justice Watkins interrupted, suggesting we separate into different rooms to discuss potential settlement terms privately. For the next 3 hours, offers and counteroffers moved between rooms through the mediator, with little progress. My parents' initial offer, a settlement of $500,000 with a non-disclosure agreement, was rejected immediately. Our counteroffer of full restoration plus legal fees with no confidentiality provision was similarly dismissed. By mid-afternoon, frustration mounted on all sides. Justice Watkins suggested a direct conversation between principals might break the impasse, and proposed that my father and I meet privately with him, present as neutral party. In a smaller conference room, with just the 3 of us present, the professional façade my father had maintained began to crack. Hannah, you need to understand what you're doing to this family, he began, his voice lower than in the formal session. Your mother barely sleeps. Family friends are asking questions. Clients are hearing rumors. I didn't create this situation, I replied evenly. I discovered it and refused to pretend it didn't happen. There's a difference. He leaned forward, the attorney demeanor giving way to paternal authority. I've spent my entire career building security for this family. Everything I've done, everything has been to protect and provide for all of us. You've never understood the pressures of that responsibility. This isn't about your career pressures. It's about you taking something that wasn't yours to take. Your grandmother didn't understand the financial realities, he countered. Ryan's business ventures required significant capital to succeed. The family's financial future was tied to his success. Your portion would have come back to you eventually through the family's overall prosperity. The familiar justification that Ryan's needs superseded mine triggered a flash of the old pain, but this time I recognized it without being consumed by it. That wasn't your decision to make, I said. Grandmother wanted me to have financial independence from the family dynamic. She understood exactly what was happening, which is why she specified her wishes clearly. You chose to override them because they didn't fit your narrative. Justice Watkins, who had been observing silently, interjected. Mr. Sullivan, the evidence regarding document alteration presents significant problems for your position. If this proceeds to trial, there may be consequences beyond civil liability. My father's expression hardened. Are you threatening me? I'm stating legal reality, the mediator replied calmly. The court takes forgery of legal documents very seriously. After a long silence, my father made a new offer. Restoration of the inheritance value minus funds already invested on my behalf, with no admission of wrongdoing, and a limited confidentiality agreement, preventing public discussion of settlement terms. Not good enough, I said. The full amount with interest, plus legal fees, and no confidentiality agreement. I won't be silenced about what happened. We reached an impasse, and Justice Watkins suggested resuming the joint session. As we stood to leave, my father said something that stunned me. You really are just like her, you know. Stubborn, self-righteous, convinced of your moral superiority. Eleanor never understood the compromises necessary to protect a family either. The comparison to my grandmother intended as criticism felt instead like the highest compliment. Thank you, I replied sincerely. That's the nicest thing you've ever said to me. When we returned to the main conference room, an unexpected development awaited. My mother, who had apparently been in separate discussions with her own newly retained counsel, announced she was prepared to provide a sworn statement confirming my account of events. I can't continue with this deception, she said, not meeting my father's thunderous gaze. Hannah is right about what happened. Robert convinced me it was in the family's best interest. But I've known all along it was wrong. Eleanor was explicit about her wishes for Hannah's inheritance. My father's face flushed dark red. Margaret, stop talking immediately. You don't understand the legal implications of what you're saying. I understand exactly what I'm saying, she replied, her voice gaining strength. I was present when you altered documents. I watched you redirect Hannah's inheritance to Ryan's business. I witnessed you systematically isolate Hannah when she discovered the truth. I won't perjure myself if this goes to trial. The room fell silent. Even Justice Watkins seemed momentarily at a loss for words. Ryan, who had been largely silent throughout the proceedings, suddenly pounded the table. "This is all your fault," he spat, looking at me for the first time. "You couldn't just go along with the program, could you? Had to be the perfect one, the righteous one. You have any idea what Dad's been like since this started? What this has done to the family?" "Ryan, that's enough," Regina Torres interrupted sharply. "No, it's not enough." He turned to my father. "Tell her what you told me to do with the money, Dad. Tell her about the offshore accounts and the shell companies. Tell her how much of her inheritance is already gone because you told me to diversify it where it couldn't be traced." My father stood abruptly. "This session is over. We need to confer privately." Justice Watkins shook his head. "Mr. Sullivan, I strongly advise against walking out. Given what's been stated here, your position has substantially weakened." What followed was 3 hours of intensive negotiation. With my mother's testimony and Ryan's inadvertent admissions, my parents' legal position had collapsed. Regina Torres, clearly recognizing the shift, worked frantically to salvage some kind of acceptable settlement. By evening, we had reached terms. Full restoration of my inheritance with interest, approximately $2.7 million, complete payment of all legal fees and expenses, transfer of the proceeds from the Vermont property sale, plus an additional $200,000 in compensatory damages, and a formal acknowledgement of the original terms of my grandmother's will. Most significantly, there would be no confidentiality agreement. The truth could be spoken freely. As we signed the necessary documents, I felt strangely hollow. The victory was complete, beyond even what Meredith had predicted possible. Yet beneath the vindication lay grief for what had been irrevocably lost, the illusion of family that had sustained me for 27 years. My mother approached as I gathered my things to leave. "Hannah," she began hesitantly, "I know this doesn't fix anything, but I am sorry. I should have stood up to your father long ago, not just today." I looked at her, really looked at her perhaps for the first time. The perfectly maintained appearance, the careful modulation of her voice, the way she stood slightly hunched as if perpetually bracing for criticism. I recognized patterns of my own former behavior in her bearing. "Why did you choose today to speak up?" I asked. She glanced toward where my father was conferring with his attorney, then back to me. "Because watching you stand firm these past months made me realize how long I've been afraid. Too afraid to protect even my own daughter. It wasn't enough, not nearly enough to heal what had been broken, but it was something real, perhaps the first authentic exchange we'd ever had." As I left the building, legal victory secured but heart still heavy with complicated emotions, I understood that while the case might be resolved, my journey was far from complete. The legal battle had ended, but the work of rebuilding a life authentic to myself, rather than defined by family expectations, was just beginning in earnest. The settlement was finalized 2 weeks after the mediation session, transferring control of assets that should have been mine from the beginning. The influx of funds, nearly $3 million, including interest, property proceeds, and damages, resolved my immediate financial concerns, but created new questions about how to manage this sudden wealth responsibly. "Your grandmother wanted this to provide you with independence and security," Meredith reminded me as we concluded our final official meeting. "How you use it should reflect those intentions." I decided to honor both my grandmother's wishes and my own evolving values. After paying all outstanding legal fees and personal debts, I established a structured financial plan with the help of an independent advisor, someone with no connection to my family or their networks. I invested the bulk of the funds conservatively to provide long-term security while allocating portions for meaningful purposes. The first major decision was purchasing a small but comfortable condominium in Cambridge, my own home, with my name alone on the deed. After years of living in spaces where my autonomy was compromised, establishing this truly personal territory represented more than just a real estate transaction. "It's weird," I told Alicia as she helped me move in, "but signing those mortgage papers felt more significant than the settlement itself. It's like, this is mine, truly mine, in a way nothing else has ever been." My second decision was establishing the Hannah Sullivan Foundation for Financial Literacy and Independence, a nonprofit organization providing education and resources to young adults vulnerable to financial control and exploitation. The foundation offered workshops, counseling services, and emergency grants to individuals escaping financially abusive situations. "We focus particularly on family financial abuse," I explained during our launch event, 6 months after the settlement. "It's a form of control that often goes unrecognized but can prevent individuals from establishing autonomy and pursuing their authentic paths." Professional opportunities expanded as well. My promotion to senior analyst had demonstrated my capabilities, despite the personal turmoil, and in January, 14 months after the confrontation at Thanksgiving dinner, I was offered a leadership position at a respected financial integrity firm, specializing in detecting and preventing fraud. "Your personal experience with financial deception gives you a perspective our clients value," the CEO explained during the interview. "Sometimes the most effective watchdogs are those who've seen the damage wolves can cause." The settlement had included no requirements for ongoing contact with my family, and for several months there was none. My father maintained public silence about the case, though I occasionally heard through professional channels that he characterized it as a private family matter resolved amicably. My mother sent a Christmas card with a brief, careful note expressing hope for healing, but requesting no response. Ryan had apparently relocated to Colorado to pursue new business opportunities with what remained of his company's assets. Life settled into new patterns built on my terms rather than inherited expectations. I developed friendships based on mutual respect and shared interests rather than obligation or status. I pursued activities. I genuinely enjoyed hiking weekend trails, taking culinary classes, volunteering at a literacy program without calculating their perceived value or acceptability to others. My relationship with Dr. Kaplan evolved from crisis management to deeper exploration of identity and purpose. The question now, she noted during a session nearly a year after the settlement, is not who you are apart from your family, but simply who you are, period. It was a profound shift in perspective. For so long, my identity had been constructed either in alignment with or in opposition to my family's expectations. True autonomy meant defining myself according to my own internal compass, neither conforming to nor rebelling against external definitions. 18 months after the confrontation, on a crisp spring morning, I encountered my mother unexpectedly at a farmer's market in Cambridge. I had heard through distant connections that my parents had separated, with my mother taking an apartment in the city, but had not sought direct confirmation. Our eyes met across a display of early strawberries, mutual recognition followed by momentary hesitation. She looked different, hair slightly longer, clothing more casual than her former carefully coordinated style, expression more open, though tinged with uncertainty. "Hannah," she said, approaching cautiously. "It's good to see you." "Hello, Mom," I replied, surprised by my own composure. "I've been hoping we might run into each other," she admitted. "I've been coming here on Saturdays for a few weeks." The implied effort to create this accidental meeting might once have moved me to immediate accommodation of her unspoken needs. Instead, I acknowledged it neutrally. "I usually shop here on Saturdays too." We moved to a nearby bench, the awkwardness of public pleasantries giving way to more direct conversation. She confirmed the separation from my father, describing it as long overdue and necessary for my own sanity. She had returned to part-time work at a community health clinic rather than her former private practice and was learning to exist outside Robert's sphere of influence. "I've been in therapy," she added, with a self-consciousness that suggested this admission was significant for her, trying to understand why I allowed so many things. "Why I participated in hurting you. And what have you understood?" I asked, neither accusatory nor encouraging. She looked down at her hands, bare of the ostentatious jewelry she once wore. "That I've spent my entire adult life afraid. Of disapproval, of conflict, of standing alone. I chose security over integrity so many times that eventually I couldn't distinguish between them anymore." It was more insight than I had expected, though it offered no magic healing for the broken trust between us. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she continued when I didn't immediately respond. "I just wanted you to know I'm trying to understand my part in what happened, and to tell you that your grandmother would be proud of you. She always saw your strength, even when the rest of us tried to diminish it." We talked for nearly an hour, not about reconciliation or rebuilding our relationship, but about the truth of our shared past and our separate presents. The conversation held neither the artificial harmony of our former interactions nor the wounded hostility of our last encounters. It was something new, authentic, bounded by appropriate caution, but not closed to possibility. As we prepared to part, she asked hesitantly, "Would it be all right if I called you sometime, just to talk?" The old Hannah would have immediately agreed, prioritizing her mother's needs over legitimate self-protection. The reactive Hannah might have refused outright, maintaining walls against any potential vulnerability. Instead, I considered what I actually wanted and could manage healthily. "I'm not ready for regular contact yet," I said truthfully, "but you can email me. Small steps might be possible." Her acceptance of these boundaries without manipulation or pressure for more suggested she might indeed be changing. Whether those changes could eventually support any kind of relationship remained to be seen, but the encounter left me feeling unexpectedly peaceful rather than destabilized. When I shared the interaction with Dr. Kaplan, she observed, "What stands out to me is that you remained centered in your own truth throughout. You didn't override your needs to accommodate hers, but you also didn't reject potential growth out of fear or anger. That's significant progress. By the second anniversary of the confrontation that had altered my life's trajectory, I had established not just financial independence, but something far more valuable, a life aligned with my authentic self, relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation, and work that reflected my values and utilized my strengths. The inheritance my grandmother had intended for me had indeed provided security, but the journey to claim it had given me sovereignty over my choices, my boundaries, and my future. On Thanksgiving Day, 2 years after I had walked out of my parents' house with no home left, I hosted a chosen family dinner in my condominium. Around the table sat those who had supported me through the darkest periods and celebrated with me through the brightest: Alicia, cousin Jessica and her partner, several colleagues who had become friends, members of my support group, and even Meredith, whose professional relationship had evolved into genuine friendship. As we shared food and conversation, I realized that the holiday, once a symbol of loss and rejection, had been reclaimed and transformed. The family dinner, where I was told I wasn't welcome anymore, had ultimately led me to discover where I truly belonged. In a life of authenticity, surrounded by relationships based on mutual respect rather than conditional acceptance. The table where I now sat as both host and equal participant represented not what had been lost, but what had been found: not just a house, but a true home built on foundations of integrity, autonomy, and genuine connection. If my story has resonated with you in any way, I'd be truly grateful if you'd take a moment to leave a comment sharing your thoughts, or perhaps your own experience with family dynamics. Sometimes the most healing thing is knowing we're not alone in these journeys. If you found value in this video, please consider hitting that subscribe button and sharing it with someone who might need to hear that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary for living authentically. Thank you for witnessing my story. And remember, family should be about love without conditions, not loyalty without truth. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.